Hello, grade 12s. Welcome to another history lesson. I'm Jeanette Chauke. The topic of today that we are going to do is extension of Cold War in China. We are going to discuss Mao's policies of the Great Leap Forward as well as the Cultural Revolution. In this topic, we know is paper 1, the topic, and then is question 4. This is an essay topic that we are going to discuss. Now, before we get into the details with the topic, we need to know where in the world is China. As you can see here with the arrow, China is here, and China is situated in Southeast Asia and along the Pacific Ocean. Now, China has got many cities inside it, and it's got 23 provinces. Taiwan, here, can you see Taiwan being the 23rd province of China? Now, Taiwan, even though it is self-governing, it is considered as the 23rd province of China. Now, in China, there were two parties. We talk about the Chinese Communist Party as well as the Kuomintang Party, the Kuomintang Nationalists, which we call them the KMT. A civil war broke out in China whereby the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP under Mao Zedong, defeated the Kuomintang Party, the Kuomintang Nationalists, and then Chiang Kai-shek moved to Taiwan. He fled to Taiwan because he was defeated. Now, this is just a background. What we are going to discuss now is Mao Zedong as he took over as the president of the People's Republic of China. He became the president as well as the chairperson, the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. Mao is considered to be the founder of the People's Republic of China. His aim when he took over was to turn China from a backward peasant society into a modern industrial nation. As we go on, we will start with the first 5-year plan. The grade 12, as you can recall, the first 5-year plan is from Stalin's first 5-year plan from Russia. Now Mao Zedong adopted the first 5-year plan from 1953 to 1957. What was the aim when he adopted the first 5-year plan? You must also remember that the relationship between China and Russia were good. Stalin and Mao Zedong had very close relations. So Mao adopted these first 5-year plans because of that. Heavy industries like steel, chemical, coal, and oil were the focus of the first 5-year plan. And because of that, inflation was reduced by fixing prices and wages. The Soviet Union helped China with cash. They helped China with equipment in terms of machinery. They helped China with expert advisors. Now, overall, the first 5-year plan was a success. However, this was not the Chinese model. This was the Soviet Union's model. Mao Zedong wanted the Chinese, the culturally tailored Chinese model. Hence, in 1958, he launched the Great Leap Forward. He abandoned Stalin's model of the 5-year plan for the Great Leap Forward. Now, what was the aim of the Great Leap Forward? The aim of the Great Leap Forward was to modernize China's industry, was to modernize China's agriculture so that enough food could be grown to feed the growing population. As we know, China has a growing population. Mao wanted to move China rapidly towards industrial and agricultural equality, which was equal to the Western countries. The Great Leap Forward was also intended to show the Soviet Union, because if you can recall, I said Stalin and Mao had close relations. Now we must remember in grade 11 that Stalin died in 1953, and then Khrushchev had to take over as the new president of the Soviet Union. Now Khrushchev and Mao did not have good relations. So he wanted, with the Great Leap Forward, he wanted to show the Soviet Union that the approach, the economic development was more vibrant and it will be more successful than the Soviet model of the 5-year plans. Now, moving forward, what was the key to success? Mao saw the key to success of the Great Leap Forward was to use millions of peasants to do the work instead of relying on machinery and experts who he distrusted. Now, why did Mao distrust this machinery and experts? It was because, if you can recall in the previous slides, these were the machinery and experts from the Soviet Union. Now, Mao concentrated on using the peasants as the key to success of the Great Leap Forward. Now the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, they encouraged the peasants to set up small-scale industries in the countryside. Instead of building big industries, they built what we call the backyard industries. For example, they had to make steel and in the backyard furnaces. Steel was burned in the backyard furnaces. Moving on, agriculture and industry of the Great Leap Forward. To improve agriculture, massive schemes of air irrigation and dams were planned to be built by a large number of peasants. All peasants became the state employees and they lost their private plots. If I can take you again from grade 11, you know peasants, they do not like it very much when they lost their own property, when they lost their private plots. So here they lost their private plots and they became state employees, which means communism was practiced to a greater extent here. Ne? The people were forced to live in communes collectively, which consisted of about 30,000 peasants. In one commune, 30,000 peasants. They lived in barracks, they ate in canteens, which means they did things collectively in the communes. They were given responsible jobs. They were also sharing canteens. They were also sharing in barracks. Now we go on with the agriculture and industry. The target was set for every village, for every commune, for every factory. Now we know Mao as being ruthless when it comes to doing things. These targets were extremely high, and people were often too scared to argue with the target. So they could keep quiet and, try to meet the target, but because the targets were extremely high, the people often could not meet the target. So they had to lie about their targets because they were afraid of Mao Zedong. Now each village commune was required to produce not only grain, but and farm product, but they also produce iron and steel. If you can remember grade 12, we're talking about the peasants here. The peasants who are used to farming, the peasants are using to producing grain and farm products, but have no clue about the iron and steel that they were supposed to produce. Now, the production of this iron and steel consumed energy, much energy of millions of peasants, and they collected anything made of iron and melted them down. Meaning that the peasants started collecting their wives' pens, the pots, the tins of which they were of no quality, and they started melting them down in order to meet Mao Zedong's extremely high targets. As we go on, the impact of the agriculture and industry, the Great Leap Forward lasted for 3 years, meaning from 1958, 1959, 1960, and was a dismal failure. You should note that. And it's very much important to know that Mao's intention, as we saw in the aim, as we were discussing the aim of Mao, his intention was to grow production of industrial output as well as agricultural output. However, here we see that the Great Leap Forward was a dismal failure. The peasants' industry did not work properly. Nobody had the expertise to run them properly. The peasants were not experienced in running their industries. The steel produced in the backyard furnaces were of poor quality, that it could not be used. Remember, we said they put target. Mao put the target that the peasants had to meet, and they were afraid. So they had to melt anything they come across, the pots, the tins, everything. Hence, we say that the steel produced in the backyard furnaces were of poor quality, that it could not be used. Now, people lied about the amount of steel that they had produced because they were scared of what would happen to them if they did not meet their targets. Now the impact continues. Most peasants neglected their farms and focused on industrial production. Because why? Industrial production consumed much energy of the peasants. Foolish ideas in farming, like plowing deep, planting crops closely to each other, contributed to poor harvests. Agricultural output decreased, could not meet the growing population of the Chinese people. The state, on the other hand, they taxed the farmers' production heavily. In 1959, drought worsened the poor condition of the in China. This led to the disastrous famine. Many peasants died of starvation. As we know, grade 12 learners, when we talk about famine, we're talking about extreme poverty that was in China due to the impact of the Great Leap Forward. Now, the Great Leap Forward led to great famine, as I said, because of that extreme poverty. You know, when you're hungry, you'll eat anything. Ne? The Chinese people now started eating whatever they could find. They started eating worms, they started eating baby frogs, they started eating toads, they started eating rats. And most importantly, cannibalism, eating of human flesh, was also common in China. Because of what? Of the Great Leap Forward. Because of famine, which was brought upon by the Great Leap Forward. Now, the number of deaths is estimated at 30 million. And this disaster was regarded as the worst man-made in the history. The years of the Great Leap Forward was to refer to as by ordinary Chinese people as the 3 bitter years. As I said, the Great Leap Forward lasted for 3 years. The policy was abandoned because it caused more famine in China. The effects of the Great Leap Forward. After the disaster of the Great Leap Forward, Mao stepped down as the president of the Republic of China in 1959, but still remained the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. It's more like you say Cyril Ramaphosa, President Cyril Ramaphosa is the chairperson of the ANC as well as the president of the country. Now the president stepped down as the president of the country and then still remained the chairperson of the ANC. So at the back, when he remained the chairperson of the Chinese Communist Party, of course he was inserting his control. He still had the authority over the country as the chairperson of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. He realized that he needed a new campaign to reassert his power within the CCP and the country after the disastrous failure of the Great Leap Forward. The Cultural Revolution started in 1966 to 1976. The aim of the Cultural Revolution was to reinforce the communist principles. As we know, Mao was a staunch communist. Mao's Little Red Book was emphasized, prepare China's youth to inherit socialism, to purge China of the four olds, meaning that to destroy the old customs in China, to destroy the old culture, the old habits, as well as the old ideas. That these were the aims of the Cultural Revolution in 1966. As we go on, Mao turned into the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, as his power base for his campaign. Appointed Lin Biao as his close supporter as the defense minister to consolidate his control over the army. Lin had some of Mao's thoughts compiled in the Little Red Book. Millions of copies were printed throughout China, and this helped to spread the cult of Mao, meaning that in the Little Red Book, Mao's ideas were printed in this Little Red Book, and then this helped to spread the cult of Mao. You know, the cult is when people start to worship a person. So Mao was worshipped because of that. Anyone who did not support the Cultural Revolution was called a revisionist. A revisionist meaning that anyone who wanted to blend the social, remember Mao has adopted this socialism, this communism state from the Marxist theory, Leninism, and as well as Stalinism. So anyone who was against, who did not support the Cultural Revolution, was a revisionist. And when you were a revisionist, you needed to be re-educated or eliminated. Now, this is the Little Red Book that I was talking about. Mao's ideas were presented into this Little Red Book. Mao, he used the youth of China as his allies and supporters. The youth formed the revolutionary units called the Red Guards all over China. Now the Red Guards, they attacked anyone and anything that was considered to be revisionist. If you did not believe in socialism, if you did not believe in communism, if you did not believe in Mao's ideas, you were eliminated, you were re-educated, you were attacked by the Red Guards. Mao told his young followers to destroy the four olds, as we mentioned, the old culture, the old ideas, the old habits, as well as the old customs. This destroyed numerous ancient artworks and buildings. Many thousands older people, including the intellectuals and old party activists, were killed or driven to suicide. Now, this is the Red Book. This simply showed how this little Red Book influenced the youth of China, all over China. Now, Cultural Revolution, we see here Mao is more like, this is the cult of Mao. This is Mao. It's more like he's been worshipped because these people are holding the little red books in order to spread Mao's ideas. Cultural Revolution's effects. Now the outcome, here we're going to talk about the outcome of the Cultural Revolution. The Red Guards, they forced schools and universities to close for 2 years, which means that the education of millions was disrupted. This led to what? To a lost generation. They sent teachers and lecturers to field to work with peasants. They seemed like they wanted to re-educate the lecturers as well as the teachers. They invaded factories, offices, and homes, and they destroyed anything they considered to be revisionist. Thousands of innocent people were beaten, were tortured, or imprisoned. About 1 million were killed because of the Cultural Revolution. Now, the impact, you can see here how the youth were becoming violent because of the Cultural Revolution. Now, the effects, around 1 million of opponents of communism were killed. Anti-communist artwork, books, monuments were destroyed. The Red Guards now started to fight against their own colleagues. They started to fight because they mistrusted each other. They started to fight over power. Cultural Revolution got out of hand. China was in chaos because of the Cultural Revolution. Now, in August 1968, Mao ordered the army to restore complete order in China. The army, they had to send 20 million Red Guards to the countryside to work the work of the peasants in order to get them under control. The Cultural Revolution, as I said, caused chaos in China, affected industrial production. Many people lost faith in the CCP as the ruling party. The Cultural Revolution was viewed as an attempt by Mao to regain power and control which he had before the Great Leap Forward. Another interpretation of is that Mao used the Cultural Revolution to get rid of the rivals within the CCP. This is the reaction of the masses. The impact of the Cultural Revolution again. The Cultural Revolution, just like the Great Leap Forward, proved to be yet another failure of the Chinese Communist Party. China suffered tremendous economic losses. Industrial production had fallen by 20% in 1967 and another 10% in 1968. In 1981, the Chinese Communist Party declared the Cultural Revolution as a serious blunder. This simply shows how the Cultural Revolution failed. Mao was blamed for the Cultural Revolution, but he was also described as the most prominent leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, in this essay, before we go to this essay question, in this essay of the Cultural Revolution, you need to remember that we talk about the two economic policies of Mao, which is the Great Leap Forward as well as the Cultural Revolution. You can put a little background of the first 5-year plan, because in the 5-year plan, we show that the 5-year plan was successful. The 5-year plan that was adopted from the Soviet Union was successful. However, Mao abandoned the 5-year plan because he needed a culturally tailored economic policy of the Chinese people. Hence, he introduced the Great Leap Forward, and then the Great Leap Forward failed, and then he had to reassert his power by introducing what? By introducing the Cultural Revolution. Now, in this essay, we need to consider the essay verbs here. The question will come across, it may be explain to what extent do you agree or critically discuss, evaluate, or examine. Now, when the question comes as the explain to what extent, you as a candidate, you are required to measure the degree to which you believe something to be the case. When they say to what extent, for example, they will say to what extent was Mao's policies of the Great Leap Forward as well as the Cultural Revolution failed. You will say, the candidate must take a stand here to say, to a greater extent, Mao's policies of the Great Leap Forward as well as the Cultural Revolution were a great failure, or they failed to a greater extent. You measure the degree to which you believe to be the case. In terms of the question here, do you agree? A statement will be given to the candidate, and the candidate will be asked to take a stand. Now, here they will say Mao's policies, for example, Mao's policies of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution were a dismal failure. Do you agree with this statement? And the candidate has to take a stand to say, yes, I do agree with the statement, or I do not agree with the statement. So the first line is to take a stance, whether you agree with the statement, and then you elaborate after taking a stand. You give reason for saying whether you agree or you don't agree with the statement. And then after that, you orientate your essay. You elaborate on your essay, and orientate is in your introduction. Now, critically discuss or critically evaluate, critically examine. Here, the candidate is asked to elaborate on both sides. You agree and contradict and an argument. Then you come to a final conclusion. For example, in this essay of Mao, when they give you a statement and they say critically examine or critically evaluate or critically discuss Mao's policies of the Great Leap Forward, you will be required to say, for example, Mao's intention in these policies were good. I mean, he intended to what? To increase the industrial output. He intended to increase the agricultural output of China. However, he failed. Can you see? This is, you agree, you contradict again. The intention was good, however, he failed. That is coming to the final conclusion. Now, let's look at this activity. The implementation of Mao Zedong's policies of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution was a dismal failure. You remember when I said, when you have to tackle this question of do you agree, they often give you a statement. This is the statement. The statement says the implementation of Mao Zedong's policies of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution was a dismal failure. The statement is telling you that. And then there will be the big question, do you agree with the statement, use relevant evidence from 1958, note here, to 1969, the years to support your line of argument. Now, when they say 1958, okay, it's fine to give a little bit of the background of the first 5-year plan, just to make sure that you adjust your paragraphs. But then the essay actually requires you to discuss the Great Leap Forward. As you know, the Great Leap Forward was launched in 1958, as well as the Cultural Revolution, which was launched in 1966. And it went on and on up until 1969. You are required to discuss it up to 1969. So, the timeline is very important here, what you are supposed to discuss. Now, here you're going to write the introduction to the question selected. You are going to practice to write the introduction to the question selected using the statement as well as the do you agree, taking a stance here. If you agree that Mao Zedong's policies of the Great Leap Forward as well as the Cultural Revolution were a dismal failure, of course, you are going to start with yes, I agree with the statement, or one could agree with the statement that Mao Zedong's policies of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution were a dismal failure because after taking a stance, you need to give reason for your stance. Because China, these two policies led China into a great famine. Because, for example, you can say these two policies led the economy of China to decrease. And then you go on by saying this essay will talk about, you elaborate on what the essay will talk about. Then in your body, in the body, it means the paragraphs of the different paragraph of the structure of your paragraphs. You use the peel method. In the peel, in each and every, it will have the point, it will have the evidence, the explanation, it will have the evidence, and then you link to the question, the linking to the question. What is the linking to the, when we say the line of argument, you have sustained the line of argument, you shall have linked your paragraph to the question. The question is about Mao Zedong's policies of the Great Leap Forward being the dismal failure. After you prove in your one paragraph that it was a dismal failure because, let's say, for example, you talk about the agriculture and you say Mao Zedong's policy of the Great Leap Forward was a dismal failure because in agriculture, foolish ideas like plowing deeply and plowing crops closer to each other led to poor harvest, led to famine. Hence, I'm saying this was a dismal failure. That's when you shall have sustained your line of argument. You shall have linked to the question. Now, when we talk about the conclusion is easy as long as you can get the introduction right. To the conclusion will be easy for you because in the conclusion you simply reaffirm what you have written in the introduction. You don't introduce a new content in the conclusion. You just reaffirm that you still take a stand, and then you reaffirm your stance that you took in the introduction. However, it should show in your first sentence that you are concluding. You should use words like, in conclusion, one can say that, and in conclusion, it might be concluded that Mao's policies of the Great Leap Forward as well as the Cultural Revolution was a dismal failure as it led to many people, millions of the Chinese people dying because of famine. Now, grade 12, before we close here, before we come to the end, you need to know that this essay question is question 4, as I said, in the structure. Remember, in paper 1, we have 6 questions. This will be question 4, and then it will always be question 4. It can never change to be question 5, to be question 6. And then you need to know this is the case study of China, and then the focus here is about the Mao's policies of the Great Leap Forward, as well as the Cultural Revolution, and it simply showed how these two policies failed and led to chaos in China. Now, this is the end of our lesson. I want to thank you and continue to study and be safe, stay safe, and be excited about this exam. Thank you very much. Jeanette Chauke.